Strange title, right? How Red Dead Redemption 2 inspired me to stop playing Red Dead Redemption 2.
I loved Red Dead Redemption 2. It's hard to describe the joy I derived from heading off into the wilderness for countless hours of hunting, exploration, and adventures. I loved coming home from work, firing up the Xbox, and getting lost in that magnificent world. And I wasn't alone in that.
So I think it was a couple years ago, I had a subscriber reach out and he asked me, I think it was during a Q&A, he asked, how do you explain to a loved one or friend the itch that Red Dead Redemption 2 and its world scratches? And it got me thinking about why the game impacted some folks the way that it did. Now, as a historian and as a man, I had my own theories, but I kind of wanted to dive down the anthropological rabbit hole and see what I could find.
Emerging a couple weeks later, I responded with a video titled Red Dead Neurology, about how Red Dead tapped into our male evolutionary proclivities for hunting, dangerous behavior, working in small groups, and immersion in nature. That video received tens of thousands of views and several hundred comments, and within them a pattern clearly emerged. People are craving adventure and nature in their lives. Admittedly, I felt the same way too.
So growing up, my parents ran a summer camp in northern Iowa, so I spent my youth in what you might call like a boy's paradise.
Shooting archery, canoeing, fishing, hunting, climbing trees, and exploring the woods. Just as I started high school, my family moved 750 miles west and 9,000 feet up to Winter Park, Colorado, where I spent the next 4 years fly fishing, camping, climbing mountains, snowboarding, and building a log cabin with nothing but an axe, hatchet, and handsaw. Suffice it to say, I was immersed in the great outdoors for nearly all of my formative years, and it was glorious.
So after graduating high school, I went to college, then I went to graduate school, and then eventually became a tenured history professor at a small college in Denver. So by that time, I had married my wife, who was really just the girl of my dreams. She's fantastic. I had achieved financial stability, which was really nice for the first time ever. And I even had a sweet loft downtown with my own private patio that had my own private hot tub, which was pretty awesome. On the outside, my life looked pretty perfect, but on the inside, not so much. I started getting super anxious and I was depressed. I had a really short fuse and I just kind of was stuck in my head. So I just kind of threw myself into my work and became what my loving wife liked to call me, a grumpy stick in the mud, which is pretty true. I was pretty lame and not at all the man of former years. My body just kind of buzzed under chronic stress from some sort of restless vexation within. I remember being in such a constant state of redlining that I remember telling my wife at one point that she shouldn't be surprised if I stroked out before I was 40. At my very core, I just felt deeply frustrated, profoundly lost, and I couldn't figure out why. But I knew something was clearly off. So it was at this time that I read a book by John Eldredge called Wild at Heart, which is actually a book that I recommended under my recommended books video that I did ages ago. In it, there was one line in particular that just immediately struck a chord with me, and that line was, "A man recovers his strength in the wilderness." I remember that line just resonating in my bones. It was like somebody jolted me awake with those defibrillator paddles. I just nodded my head and thought, of course.
I'd spent the first 2 decades of my life immersed in the great outdoors, where I felt alive and thoroughly at peace. I then spent the last decade confined in cities, where I felt, well, miserable. It became clear to me that I needed a transformation. I needed to change my environment. I needed to return to the wilderness to recalibrate my mind, restore my spirit, and recover my strength. That insight led to the reestablishment of annual Canadian fishing expeditions with my father, deep in the maze of forests, rivers, and lakes from southern Ontario to the shores of Hudson Bay. These trips changed my life, revitalized my spirit, and helped my dad and I to bond even closer. While our trips gave me an intense dose of adventure and wilderness I was craving, they only happened once a year, allowing ample time for my nature deficit disorder, as I like to call it, to return during the long stretches in between expeditions.
My anxiety would return, and my irritability would return and just kind of creep back in, along with new feelings of frustration. Like I stalled out in my life and in my career, and that I kind of could and should be doing more. I sort of felt like I was settling for a good enough life with just these brief moments of feeling alive. So I started wondering what would happen if I just kind of kept drifting along, right? Like, what kind of life would I live? And what kind of man would I become?
Everywhere I looked, men were lost, numbed out, bored, and going through the daily motions set on autopilot. They just seemed domesticated, isolated, and muted in their masculinity, like the light had gone out of their eyes.
I didn't know exactly what to do, but I knew I didn't want to be that kind of man, and I didn't want to live that kind of life. So like any academic, I hit the books looking for answers. I started just devouring books on masculinity and men's self-development. I started reading biographies of the men I most admired and wanted to emulate. I started reading about historical rites of passage, masculine virtues, and cultivating brotherhoods. I read books on men finding purpose, on embracing responsibility, and going after the desires of their heart, on how a man restores his body, mind, and spirit, on becoming a better husband, better friend, better family member, and on how masculinity has just kind of come under attack today, where it seems that society just wants men to kind of be more like women. So during this time, Red Dead Redemption 2 came out, which sort of seemed to offer that wilderness and adventure that I've been craving, but from the comfort of my own house. So I just jumped in fully and immediately fell in love with that game. I was just playing it constantly and started even making content about it on my YouTube channel, which eventually led to the Red Dead Neurology video that I mentioned earlier. But here's the thing. So the more I started playing that game, the more I started thinking about why I was playing that game so much and why I loved it so much. So after going down that anthropological rabbit hole, I sort of emerged and unpacked my findings in the Red Dead Neurology video. So the 3 reasons I and millions of others were drawn to that game, so in love with that game, and why it scratched that itch became clear. Number 1, because we evolved in nature, we're programmed to function optimally within it. And when we're alienated from it, we just go a little haywire, as if we're kind of missing this necessary nutrient for our body, mind, and sense of self. Number 2, we become domesticated versions of what we once were. We're dogs, but our ancestors were wolves. Yet we're still wired from 300,000 years of genetic adaptations to crave the adventure and risk that was inherent in ancestral life. Number 3, for most of human history, almost all of human history, men hunted and fought together in small groups. And as a result, we adapted to function optimally within them. Alone, without brotherhood, men struggled mightily. So despite how much I loved playing Red Dead, I realized that the game could only give me a synthetic dose of these things. It was a fun but weak imitation of nature, adventure, risk, and brotherhood. What I needed and what I was truly after was a steady dose of the real thing. So from there I started spending less time in Red Dead and spending more time living in my real life, getting out into nature, having adventures, and cultivating brotherhood with my closest friends in person. I started picking the brains of inspiring men living inspiring lives. I also worked to create a kick-ass marriage, and following the birth of my kiddo this past summer, really learning how to become a dad and especially how to become an awesome dad. I started pursuing huge goals, right? Like the ones I always had, but I had never pursued. I just kind of started tapping into that potential. As other men watched on, they started asking questions and they wanted a taste of it as well. A year and a half ago, when I did my channel's second Q&A, somebody asked me what I'd be doing if I wasn't teaching history, right? Like if I wasn't involved in that, what would I be doing?
That's a good question. I would probably be writing books on historical masculinity, things like that, and probably doing programs for men, because men need help too.
So that trip, actually the night that I filmed that, I remember going back to the place that we rented and I started outlining that concept. And after another year of researching and writing and living all that stuff out, I distilled and organized my findings into a men's self-development program, grounded in what I do in history and in anthropology. looking to the past to better understand our natural design and what we need to thrive, not just survive, but thrive in the present. After a decade and a half of teaching in college, I finally this last fall stepped away from higher ed. It was just way too woke for me, and I had bigger and better things to do, like dedicating myself to the Men's Self-Development Project full time. Over the last couple months, I invited a handful of guys to be part of it, and the impact that the program's had on those guys has just been amazing. Reconnecting them with nature, embracing responsibilities, organizing their lives and goals, building strength, getting fit, cultivating brotherhood, improving their relationships, embracing risk, and having adventures. The program helped them restore their mind, body, and spirit. To take a page from my hero, Teddy Roosevelt, these guys went from being mere spectators of life to entering the arena of life and daring greatly. So what does this mean for the channel moving forward? Well, if it wasn't evident by not making a Red Dead Redemption 2 video for the past year, old MDH is turning the page. So no longer making Red Dead videos, that's probably not a shock to anybody though.
However, I do want to be clear. I'm definitely not coming down on anyone still playing the game, nor am I telling anyone to stop playing the game. But if you find it's taking the place of what you're actually wanting to do in your life and experience, then I encourage you to just get out there and try it. The game will always be there. I may even boot it back up myself at certain points. There's just more out there waiting for you is all. And I encourage you guys to seek out that experience, as it's been incredibly rewarding for me.
What you can expect though are videos diving into the concepts that I've been exploring. So things like masculinity, nature, history, and so on. I'll also continue to make videos of my outdoor adventures and keep doing some of that hands-on history stuff that I just love. Now, I know this shift won't be for everyone, so if you're not into this stuff, I understand and I absolutely wish you the best. But for those of you that are game to continue this journey, I think you're gonna love it. So moving forward, you can expect new videos and updates on the program's rollout. All right, folks, thanks for watching.